Is everything working? Okay. I will call to order the Southbury Board of Selectmen regular meeting, April 1st, 2021, in room 205 to order at 7 PM. If we could have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next up is public comments. Do we have any public comments from the audience? Do we have any public comments from the viewing public?
Nobody's online.
Okay. All right, then we will move on to announcements and correspondence that's in your packet.
Jeff, could I make a motion to move something in the agenda? Is this an appropriate time for that?
You want to move something in the agenda?
Yeah, I wanted to move the discussion on the letter of support for the Southbury Ambulance Association to happen prior to the unfinished business discussion in letter I, just because we do have volunteers here and thinking that we could get them on the road sooner, if we do it sooner rather than later.
I'll second that.
Who seconded that?
Jason.
Me.
Okay. So the motion is to move item 4 under new business to the first on new business, is that correct?
No, I would put it ahead of unfinished business, right after H, between H and I.
Okay, between H and I.
So it's a new business, kind of out of the order of the other new businesses we have, but at least it gets the folks on the road sooner.
So we'll have two new businesses, essentially.
2 sections of new
Yeah.
business.
Okay. That's the motion. Seconded. Discussion. Anybody else? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Opposed? Abstentions? It carries. And we'll do that. All right. You have your announcements and correspondence. We'll move on to the consent agenda.
Motion to approve?
Can I have a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion on the motion?
Is the assistant town clerk position, is that open, or what's the
Yeah,
status of
why is that
position?
coming up? Are we changing the job, or is it open? I don't
No,
remember
we're-
resignation.
The assistant, they're the assistant, not the deputy town clerk, just the assistants. We're upgrading the job description. We have an opening.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, we have an
There's a- That's all, okay.
Yeah.
That's usually when we get job descriptions,
Yeah.
so that's what I was,
Yeah,
I
we've
don't,
had-
do we get that resignation? I don't remember it.
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
a couple
I'm
And
minutes.
then it was COVID, and there was a number of things. Okay. I'll call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? It carries.
Are we missing Justin Betty on this meeting, or?
I'm here.
Oh,
Is
I
that-
don't,
He's there. He's.
I didn't hear his voice on the vote, that's what I was wondering.
Minutes of March 18th, 2021 regular meeting, and minutes of March 30th, 2021 special meeting. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Have a second?
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? It carries. Bid and procurement, there's a addition to the bid policy we'd like to change.
Motion to adopt the amendment as presented?
I'll second it.
I'll second it.
Okay,
I got more seconds.
we got a lot of seconds. We'll take
Everyone's
thirds.
excited about this one.
We'll get some thirds and get some whatnot. Any discussion on it?
Makes sense.
Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? And that carries. Do we have transfers?
Yes.
There we are. Up right there on the board.
Very important one,
Yeah.
because I hear the live stream is not working.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second?
Any discussion?
My only question is, what the plan is on the upgrade to this room? Is there,
Yeah,
have
we're
we
working
gotten
on,
estimates and,
we're working on that, yep. It's unfortunate, there's a lot of, call for this technology right now. So it's a ways off on it and getting people to get us prices. So we are working on it. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions, and it carries. Letter of support for Southbury Ambulance Association's application for the paramedic PSA. Do I have a motion?
make a motion that the Southbury Board of Selectmen, upon the recommendation of the EMS Committee, hereby agrees to submit a letter of support on behalf of the Southbury Ambulance Association's application to the state to apply for the primary service area for paramedic coverage for the town.
Second.
I'll second it, or Emily can.
And second and third, we'll take turns here, that'll work. Any discussion? All in favor?
Can I
Aye.
ask a
Aye.
question? I'm sorry, I didn't speak quickly enough. I'm just wondering, now, we were paying a fair amount of money to an EMS provider. I don't know if it was Trinity or somebody like that. Are we still paying that, or is that now not?
Well, we gotta let them get up and running, then we'll work on the, ending the
So we're
contract.
still paying them
Yeah.
until Southbury Ambulance gets up and running? Is that basically it? Okay.
So my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is Southbury Ambulance, if they're granted the PSA, they then become responsible for that paramedic coverage area.
Yes,
And once that happens, then the town may see a monetary decrease by way of our contract to Trinity
yes.
Correct.
at that time.
But I think there will still be a contract with Trinity, but maybe for a
No.
lesser amount, or the contract would be eliminated?
We eliminate
No.
the contract.
Or the
There,
contract would go through SAA, I think?
So I think
Correct.
we have to be careful here, because we're voting on a motion made and seconded to approve. The discussion is on the approval, not on what's gonna happen on the
that's all part of
contractual
it,
end.
though.
It's relevant, though, I think.
Yeah, this is all part of that discussion.
I'm just trying to understand it. There was a whole flurry of documentation that was dumped into our email boxes, and I have to admit, I didn't read it all, but I did scan a lot of it, and those are the questions that I had.
Essentially, what will happen is SAA will pick up paramedic, take over for Trinity, and then from there, as a backup to cover, since Trinity had provided not only the paramedic, but a backup as well. So what SAA has done is said, we'll guarantee the paramedic, and they will contract with Trinity.
Right.
To provide the backup.
My understanding was correct on that.
Right.
Geraldine is nodding in the audience.
I've been paying attention.
Hey, Jeff, if I might?
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I just want to, I want to thank Emily and the committee and those who are involved in this, and as well as the folks from SAA and the other services. I think this is something we've talked about for a long time, and it's exciting, and I think to the benefit of the town that it's moving forward. So thanks to Emily and to everyone else on the committee.
Okay,
It's encouraging to see that plans we talked about, in some cases years ago, are coming to
Yep.
fruition in roughly the same manner as we envisioned in a positive way down the road, so it's good. Thanks for
Amen.
everybody on that.
okay. All in favor? Again?
Aye.
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 Opposed, abstentions, and it carries. Okay, up on unfinished business. Thank you, John. Have a good Easter. Oh, sorry. Next up is the STS questions. We have it up there on the board. I got this late from the home and family people that I was asked by the board to contact. If I could read this to you, it's from John Hirschgauer. I hope I said that right, John. Hey Jeff, thank you so much for reaching out yesterday and for sending these questions along. I very much appreciate your preface to these questions. It helps to assure our members that the town is not advocating for the closure of STS. If possible, could you include this bold-faced clause in the preface to emphasize the STS continued importance to its residents? And he's given me the services the school provides have helped countless individuals with intellectual disabilities over its many years of operation, and he would like added, and continue to benefit its current residents. He asked me if that could be added. I would entertain a motion to add that to the end of
So
that
moved.
sentence.
I'll
Thank you.
second it.
Thank you. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstentions, it carries, that will be added. Betsy, you're adding that? Wonderful. Goes on, the preface itself is a huge relief. If you were willing and able to make other changes, I have two in mind. If you are open to revising the first question, I would ask that it be revised as to eliminate the mention of closure. We really don't want these questions to prompt the governor or DDS to take premature steps to close STS. Potentially, you could replace it with something like the following. What is the state's vision for the future of the Southbury Training School? Does it intend to allow STS residents to remain there if they and their guardians choose to do so?
I would make a motion to replace question 1 with the question there.
Second.
Made and seconded. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, it carries. As we discussed yesterday, I think it's in the town's financial interest to defend the existence of a facility that has 400 employees and 147 residents, many of whom continue to spend money in town. Also, the groundskeepers at STS continue to maintain the facility and keep it from becoming a blight to the town. Those workers would also obviously cease those efforts were the facility to close. My other concern is more minor. Could question 9 be revised to include the bold-faced clause? It would pose Southbury's closure as a hypothetical rather than a given. So he's asking, it says, is the state willing to take on structure demolition and environmental remediation if STS closes? So the bold is if STS closes. Do I have a motion on that?
I'll move that.
Second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mike. Any discussion on that?
I would just beat a dead horse on this, just want to make sure, because we're saying we're adding STS closes. I would amend that to spell out that it says Southbury Training School. Just want to make sure we have that carry through in this letter with the questions.
We can do that. And I think it's, if not, what environmental remediation requirements will be needed. It's very kind. I understand if these revisions are not possible.
Point of order. I think we had a motion on the table that was seconded that we now need to vote on.
Oh, sorry. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? It carries. It goes on, I understand if these revisions are not possible, but wanted to make them known to you regardless. Thanks for sharing this story about your mother's time at STS. The facility means so much to all of us, and I hope it continues to enrich our community in one form or another for decades to come. Best, John Hirschgauer. So just for the public, my mother was the Assistant Director of Social Service at the training school. And we talked a little bit on personal matters on that. Okay, so as it is now, we have the letter, the draft up there, and the questions. Do we have a motion for approval?
Make a motion to approve the letter and the questions as amended tonight.
Have a second on that?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
I would like to make a motion to strike with intellectual disabilities from the cover letter. I just think that Southbury Training School has helped so many people beyond even that scope that it would just be better if we said countless individuals over its many years of operation.
I guess in that line of thinking, it does help the parents and the caregivers of the people that are there being treated. So it does, I think Emily has a point about that, but I can go with it either way.
Is that a second?
I'll second it, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm not following Robert's
That's okay.
rules very well.
Just trying to, okay, so the motion is to remove count, with intellectual disabilities. Is that correct?
Yes, just that portion.
With. So we have the services of the school provides, the services the school provides have helped countless individuals over its many years of operation and continue to benefit its current residents.
I think another concern with that terminology of intellectual disabilities is that some of the folks might have been there without intellectual disabilities, maybe some other physical infirmities that required them to be there. So I'm kind of troubled by the word intellectual myself, but
Um,
it's just me.
We could take it out if it's made and seconded.
Yeah, I don't think it changes the substance of the letter, so I think that would be fine.
Okay, I'll call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? And it carries. I'll call the original vote with the change. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? It carries. All right. Next is the sustainability, CT. This is just Tom Connors and Chuck Liddy are on Sustainable Southbury, working on that. Sustainable Connecticut is a program many towns are involved in. I forget the number of towns. There's no obligation to the town. They'd like to get this done because there's a chance that they can get some intern to work on putting together the information to present to Sustainable Connecticut, and they award bronze or silver. It's been done at CCM, and a lot of towns have done it. So I would entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve this resolution.
And I'll second it.
And a second. Any discussion?
Is there any cost involved for Southbury other than
none.
Kevin's time?
None. It's a pretty nice program, actually. We've done, like I said, we've done a lot, the Southbury, when you listen to it, they've accomplished a lot of it. So I don't think it's just a matter of putting it together in the proper form to present it. And I think it's good for our economic development. I think it's good for vision of our town. And I think Kevin is good to lead that.
No, I support it.
Yeah, Jeff?
Yes, Mike?
Yeah, I certainly would agree. It's also sort of follows, I think, historically in terms of some of our other historic certification type things, like, being a tree city and all that. It's sort of a contemporary, another contemporary version of those. So I'm a big fan of Sustainable City. I think it's a great opportunity.
And I would thank Tom Connors and Chuck Liddy for leading that for us. Any other discussion?
What would the process be for us to establish the advisory sustainability team? Which is
We
one
would
of the
use
things.
a Sustainable Southbury, who's already working towards it, which is Tom Connors and Chuck Liddy, and we'll just, and then
And
work
Kevin
with.
would be like a liaison.
Yeah, Kevin would be the point person in town hall, yeah. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? And it carries. Item 3, request by Selectman Bertram to discuss town manager style of government. We talked a little bit about this at the last meeting.
I had a motion I'd like to put out there for a vote if possible. I mean, I think it's a good time to move this forward.
Do you want to make the motion?
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve this motion, or resolution, I'm not sure what it's called.
Maybe a motion.
Was this included in our materials? I don't remember.
This just came in.
Yeah, I don't,
I can read it if you like, or you can just read it yourself.
Can you scroll down, Betsy?
thank you.
So motion is made, there's been no second.
Second? I'll second. I was waiting for everybody to say they finished reading. Hard to tell with
Yeah,
Mike and Justin.
Motion has been made and seconded.
I have some comments if anybody wants to hear them.
Discussion on the
yeah,
motion.
go ahead, Drew.
George, go ahead.
I think it's a good time to move this forward. Our most recent Charter Revision Commission endorsed the study in 2 separate memos. The chair of our Strategic Plan Commission endorsed the study. A senior member of the Board of Finance also endorsed it recently. And a townwide survey of 1,177 respondents done in April of 2018 showed that 47.4% of the folks responding supported the town manager approach to government. That means, if you do the math, that's 558 Southburyans who commented in favor of it. Notably, only 28.6% of respondents expressed opposition in this survey, with 24% unsure. So I think if people are looking for a voice from the town to move this forward, I think that's it right there. I'd like to move it without further ado. As I said before, an endorsement for a town manager study commission does not automatically equate to approval or an endorsement for a switch to town manager. I want to hear the results from this study commission before making up my mind on any of this, but I think it's something we should be looking at. On another note, I'd like to stress that a town manager is not a hired replacement for a first selectman. I think there's a misconception about that in the public, and that's just not how it works. In the town manager form, we still have a board of selectmen, and a first selectman will probably sit on that board, so you still have control by a first selectman and a board of selectmen, but the town manager takes over a lot of the day-to-day mundane routine operations of the town, frees up the board to work on policy. And, a town manager does report to the Board of Selectmen, and I suppose the Board of Finance in some way. The boards will make policy, establish long-term goals, finalize town budgets, and these boards can terminate the town manager for poor performance or for other reasons, depending on how the contract is set up. So that's about what I have to say here tonight.
Anybody else?
I have some comments. I'll comment on the motion in a minute. We just for the public's notice, the members of the board just received that tonight, so it's the first time any of us are reading it. and I'm generally hesitant to vote on any motions that are presented in that fashion. But as a general matter, and I'll refer people to my comments at the last meeting where I had more comments on this. I'll just summarize briefly. If we're going to talk about the strategic planning survey, I think you have to look at the whole strategic plan, and this board came up with priorities for that strategic plan. Town manager was not on that list. There are many other items which have similar percentage of responses. So if we're going to look at that, we have to look at it globally. We have to look at the strategic plan. We have to come up with a new list of priorities. And if we're going to send it to anybody, I would then send it to the strategic plan commission. But personally, I don't think this is the right process at all to form a committee or to send it to the strategic plan commission. We've had 3 charter revision commissions over the last 10 years. All 3 have declined to recommend a town manager. All 3 discussed them at some level. The public commentary on this topic is very minimal. The last Charter Revision Commission, based on my review of all the minutes, had 3 public comments, 2 in favor, 1 against. My Charter Revision Commission that I served on, I believe, looking back, had 1 public comment on this topic. And the 2008-2009 Charter Revision Commission did, I believe, a lot of the work that you're looking to do. So I suggested at the last meeting that people gather that information, look at what the 08-09 Charter Revision Commission did, because when we're looking at this topic, the arguments, the pros, the cons, whether a town manager makes sense or not, those types of arguments have not changed. We should, have a starting point. And I believe a lot of that work has already been done. To me, my personal opinion is that this is a charter revision question. So for our next Charter Revision Commission, what I would envision is the Board of Selectmen, whoever it may be at that time, should start having meetings a couple of months before that Charter Revision Commission meets. Other towns do this. Southbury has not really done this in the past, where the Board of Selectmen or committee of the Board of Selectmen can meet for a couple of months before you're about to appoint the commission, evaluate issues in the charter that you would like to recommend to the Charter Revision Commission, and that board, if it sees fit, can recommend to the Charter Revision Commission to look at a town manager or not. And ultimately, it's up to a Charter Revision Commission, even if a Board of Selectmen doesn't ask them to look at it, it's up to them to determine the issue. As to the issue of timing about, not having enough time, there's a mechanism in the statutes for that as well. A Charter Revision Commission in this town, historically, we usually give them under a year to do a draft report, but that's not necessary. Under the statutes, you can give them up to 16 months. And the only entity in the municipality that has any authority over this topic is a Charter Revision Commission. So to form a whole new committee to then make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen about a charter revision, there's just a disconnect to me there, because it's the Charter Revision Commission that ultimately has a say. So I really think it's a topic for the Charter Revision Commission. So that's sort of my philosophical thoughts on the matter. I think this is something that should not be handled in this manner, and I haven't seen any impetus for it. I've asked, at the last meeting, I said I'd love to hear from the public. We really haven't. This is not an issue that our public is talking about, as far as I can gather. Now, I'll turn to the motion, which, like I said, we just got tonight. If this board is inclined to go down this path, I would encourage the board to change this motion. First off, it's saying we got to actually impanel a committee by April 15th. That is giving the public less than 2 weeks to provide interest over the Easter holiday and a Region 15 school break. So I think that's not the way to handle this. This is not an urgent matter. If this body believes that we should form this committee, I don't, but if the body believes so, I believe you need to give the public a lot more time and have a lot more process to do that. I also don't think anybody should be given preference in that. It says here that members of former Charter Revision Commission should be given priority. I would disagree with that. I think that you look at the pool of applicants on any committee you're handling for what they are and their interest and their experience, and make a decision, and you may very well in that process say, oh, this person has more experience in charter revision or not, but I don't think that the motion itself should do that. So philosophically, I don't think we should be doing it at all. If we do it, I would suggest a different approach, and if you're inclined to do it, I would really say the Strategic Plan Commission, after we go through that list of priorities, would be the appropriate body anyways. Thank you.
Mike Rosen, any comments?
Thanks, Jeff. So as I said at the last meeting, I'm certainly not opposed to the exploration of considering a town manager, but having spoken to some former members of past charter review commissions over the last 2 weeks, and having had some time to think, I do believe that there's an existing process and there's an existing entity that exists for these types of deliberations. And that is, as Selectman Bucksbaum has noted, Charter Review Commission. I don't believe that there is, if the town was in crisis, I might feel differently, but I don't believe that the town is in crisis. And even more so, there is not a lot of talk in town regarding this. Even since, frankly, this was brought up, there hasn't been a lot of chatter. There's been a couple of letters. I've gotten one phone call from a resident, but I don't believe that there is a dire sense of urgency to move forward on this. So I do believe it is worthy of exploration. I do not believe that the formation of a special study commission is the right process or entity to pursue it. So I would be inclined to want to charge the next Charter Review Commission and make this an explicit charge in their review as they move forward, and give them the adequate time to do so.
Thank you, Mike. Justin, do you have any comments?
As I mentioned in the last meeting, I have no problem with us looking at this. I do, as does Selectman Bushbaum, think that this should go through the Strategic Plan Commission. We know that they're going to be looking for some new charges, and it's a good group, and they're more than capable of interviewing people that previously served on the charter revision committees.
Okay, so on my comments, I think I have, Emily, you want to go?
You can go first. That's
No,
fine.
no, go ahead.
Go ahead,
You got
please,
the floor,
please.
go ahead.
Nope. Go ahead, please.
If you want to speak on this, now's the time.
I have no problem. I think we look at it, we have the charter revision coming back to the board, now this is pre my time, and saying that this should be explored further. So if we've got a committee coming back to us and saying, hey, we didn't have enough time to look at this, and we believe that you should create the time to look at this, I think we should take that seriously. And this is, as George said, this is just, I think everybody has said, this is research. So I think we owe it to them and to ourselves to do the research, and that's fine. Whether it's through this committee, charter revision, strategic planning, whichever the case may be, I think we can form that. And it sounds like not through this option, and that's okay. I think Jason's comment about, you make the comment about it being about strategic planning and a focus, and if that's the route. I think George's comment of saying, well, through the strategic plan, we learned this, is kind of a separate issue. This isn't just a charge of strategic plan. It's something that came through charter revision. And ultimately, it would be a charter revision committee who would ultimately look at this. So if that's the route that we're going down, and it sounds like a lot of people on the board are in favor of, we can give them 16 months to do this. By law, my understanding, by law, we have to do a charter revision every 5 years, but that doesn't mean that we can't impanel a committee to exclusively look at this for a charter revision now. So if we're feeling like that's the case, then that's something that I would support in just a research capacity. If we feel like the research is better done through strategic planning, then I understand, and that's fine too.
Can I just note one thing? You cannot exclusively charge any charter revision commission to do anything. When you form a charter revision commission, you can charge it to look at something, but you open up the whole charter and they could look at everything, which is why you try not to do it too often. Like it's the charter, for lack of a better term, is like our town constitution, and you don't want to be looking at it every year. And we're not too far off from the next Charter Revision Commission. So absent any urgency, if there was urgency in an issue and public outcry, I may feel differently, but absent any urgency, I would wait for the next Charter Revision Commission.
So I feel the same, that we should wait to the next charter revision upgrade. We're pretty close to it. Open it up sooner. We can gather information from previous charter commissions to give that to them. And I do believe that we should look at the strategic planning, what the people wanted us to look into that was important to them. I think one of them, we did try to get worked on, but there was a series of events. One of them which is whether we should form our own police department or not. That's been a lingering issue at a higher concern of the residents than the style of government, is my opinion. So there's a motion on the floor.
Can I make a comment?
Oh, go ahead, George.
This particular motion was really written in response to specific points made by our former Charter Revision Commission in two memos. They suggested we form a blue ribbon type committee to review this town manager option. And that was written back in almost 2 years ago now, in 2019. And nothing has happened, I mean, since then, really. And it was mentioned to me that this recommendation was made by the Charter Commission and nothing was done, which is why I brought it up. And it just seemed like 2 years was enough time. I think in some prior conversations, we were thinking it might take 3 years to implement this sort of thing if you decided to go that way. So I think it could take that long. I don't recommend delaying starting it because it could well take that long. And I think it's something worth doing. It's come up in a lot of different discussions over the years. The information from the 2008-2009 Charter Revision Group, I believe, is lost. I have not seen that come up anywhere. I could be wrong. On the other hand, that information is 13 years old. So how relevant is it today? I don't know. Probably has some relevance. But again, I wrote this to reflect what was recommended by our previous Charter Revision Commission. I respect their judgment, and that's why I did it.
I think in the previous charter revision, or the last charter revision, it was not a vote taken on a recommendation that was supported. If I could be wrong on that, but I think it was a comment, not and it didn't make it onto the ballot.
I thoroughly respect the charter revision process, and anybody serves in a voluntary capacity for this town. But recommending to the Board of Selectmen that they form a committee is not within the charge of a Charter Revision Commission. So we weren't obligated to do anything with it. I've shared tonight my views on it, how I perceive the process. So to me, there was a couple other recommendations in that letter to George that you haven't talked about at all. So I'm still struggling with why town manager is coming up. They also made a recommendation about, I believe, volunteerism of some sort, and a recommendation about management of town parks. But those haven't come up either. Management of town parks now, that's something within our purview, so maybe we should, look at what those concerns were and look about that. But changing our form of government is not within our purview. That's within the purview of a Charter Revision Commission, which is why I believe as I do on this topic.
Okay, motion is made and seconded to, on this resolution. I guess I'll call the vote. If you are in favor of this resolution, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Nay?
Nate?
Nay.
Nay.
And it does not pass. Okay. Next up, if we're ready to move on, Community Relations Task Force. Mike and I have been working on this to form a community relations task force with a mission. I'll read into the record. The Community Relations Task Force promotes acceptance of all members of the Southbury community and focuses on advancing understanding of the diverse and multicultural makeups of its citizens. The task force collaborates with existing organizations such as the Region 15 School District and local religious institution to advise the Board of Selectmen on ways to improve equity and inclusion in all sectors of the community. I'm looking for the task force to consist of an advisor from the Region 15 School District, a Southbury High School student, a member of the clergy, a community representative, and a selectman from each political party. I'm looking for a motion to form this task force.
So moved, Mike Rosen.
Thank you, Mike. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion?
Jeff, if I might.
Yes, Mike?
Thank you. So this is something, you know, I've talked about in various forms for a while. I really think that, and I appreciate the work and the thoughtfulness that Jeff has put into this. I also appreciate the input we've gotten some members of our local clergy in moving this forward. You know, all of our, you know, one of the great strengths of Southbury is our interfaith community. And I think that all of them, in some way, shape, or form, in the course of the past year plus, has spoken to their congregants, their respective congregants, about these types of issues, about the increasing diversity and multiculturalism of not only Southbury, but our surrounding communities, of our state, of our nation. You know, the fastest growing population of all of Connecticut is an immigrant population. So I think this is a good first step. It also follows and can learn from some of the work that Region 15 has done with our young people. I specifically asked Jeff if we could include in this a high school student. I think the voice of youth is really important in this. I think they have insights that some of us, some of us older folk, as I'm about to turn 50, may not have, and have some perspective that's really valuable. And ultimately, it's, I think what part of our responsibility is we're looking to create a Southbury that is always improving, and always better, and always more welcoming to anyone who seeks to call it home, or work here, or eat here, or shop here, etc. So I hope that the and I hope that the board would be willing to move forward. I think that there is interest in the community to explore this, and to do it in a way that that really represents the voice of everyone and gives everyone a chance to participate in a community-wide conversation, and that they can come back to us with recommendations on a going basis for continuing to ensure that Southbury is a welcoming town that respects all voices, all genders, all colors, all ethnicities, all, et cetera. So I appreciate, Jeff, you putting this forth, and I hope, and I'm certainly glad to hear from everyone else. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
I'm not a constitutional scholar, but I think we have a problem with combining church and state on this commission. We can't appoint members to committees or commissions based on religion. Doing so runs counter to our Constitution and our state constitution. On the federal level, the 14th Amendment prohibits all levels of government from either advancing or inhibiting religion. In the broadest sense of a governmental entity, we are required to maintain a separation between church and state. The government is prohibited from showing favor or burden to a particular religion. Individual citizens are free to bring their religious convictions into the public arena, but the government is prohibited from favoring one religious view over another, or even favoring religion over non-religion. I can't support appointments to town commissions based on religious affiliations. Perhaps we should consult the town attorney on this, but I don't think there's really any wiggle room on that. I also have concerns about inviting employees from Region 15 into discussions about town policy. We don't usually get involved with Region 15, and they usually stay out of our affairs. And I don't know why this, I mean, I guess I could see it, but it just seems odd to me that we're trying to combine Region 15 into the town.
Hey, Jeff,
Yes, Mike?
can I just respond to George if you don't mind before others go, unless others want to go first?
I had some other comments, but go ahead, Mike.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were, I'm
George.
sorry, I can't
That's
see
what I
you.
thought.
No, I'll pick mine up later. You can
No,
go ahead.
George,
No, please finish. I
George
didn't
continue.
realize you weren't done.
George can continue on. I didn't realize he was not finished.
No,
No, go ahead, George.
I have another issue in the sense of I don't understand the definition of equity and inclusion. Maybe I do understand it, maybe that's the problem. I was struck by an example from today's news from Western Carolina College that warned its RAs not to use the words Easter and Christmas, as those words were counter to their inclusion targets, whatever that means, I don't really know. Then there was a private school in Manhattan that issued an inclusive language guide. In this guide, the readers were warned against using the words mom, dad, mother, and father. I mean, I don't know where inclusion goes. I mean, if you look at what's going out there in the world, it can be troubling. I mean, are we gonna ban Dr. Seuss books? Does inclusion, is it just another word for censorship? I also have an issue with equity in the sense that I don't know if equity means what it does anymore. I look for equality of opportunity, but not necessarily equity of the end result. And I'm not in favor of government initiatives that promote one race over another. And I'm kind of just a little bit troubled by this and where it could go. It sounds innocent enough on its face, but where does it end up? Where does it push us? That's my concern.
Okay, Mike, you were gonna say something?
Thanks, Jeff. And thank you, George, for your comments. Regarding, I'm not a constitutional lawyer, and, certainly if and I appreciate and value the separation of church and state. If it is, if, we hear from council that it would be inappropriate to have a member of the clergy, I suggest that we could include and request that any member of the clergy be open to and willing, who is willing, can participate in more of an advisory role than as a formal member of the of a task force, which is something that government does do and certainly advises clergy. And I think that we've seen that throughout history. Regarding the definition of equity and inclusion, the definition of equity, according to Merriam-Webster, is the quality of being fair and impartial. The definition of inclusion is the action or state of including or being included within a group or structure. I also think it's important to state that this isn't, just like any task force, just like the Edgewood Task Force, they have no powers other than recommending to the Board of Selectmen approaches towards it. They may help shine a light on what equity and inclusion does mean. And by putting together, I think, a diverse committee, we will have diverse opinions and diverse perspectives. So that's my point of view on that. But George, thank you for the commentary and thoughts.
Okay, anybody else on this?
I have a few things I wanted to raise. I know George has already talked about equity and inclusion. I too had some concerns just with the word equity. I think the proper word here would really be equality. When we look at the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, we're having a lot of Constitution talk tonight, we guarantee equality in the 14th Amendment and due process and justice. And so I think what we're going for here is equality and inclusion. And if we're saying that there's ways to improve that, it troubled me a bit in saying, well, if we need to improve inclusion, it sounds like there's exclusion in town. And if that's the case, then yeah, I do think that we have a committee that could report that back to us, then that needs to be the case, because we do want to have equality within the town. I also have would say that when we look at this, then we want to be inclusive. That's what this community relations task force is about. Yet when we look at the representation, it's not entirely inclusive. When we think of it just having, one high school student and thinking a high school student represents the entire body, does that really mean that it's inclusive? Additionally, there's no representative here from Heritage Village. That's a huge part of our community. So that's not being inclusive of this task force either. But as to what George said about separation of church and state, I would think that we should table this for this meeting so that we can have town council review this before we do something that may be deemed unconstitutional in nature. But to the end of what I kind of started this conversation with, I would like to make a motion as we look at this to exchange equity with equality.
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on this motion?
If I might, Jeff?
Mike, go ahead.
There are dictionaries and words have meaning, and words also evolve over time. I have no problem including the word equality if that would make more comfortable, but equity and equality are different things. So if we want to say improve equality, equity, and inclusion in all sectors of the community, that's fine. But equality and equity are different things. As I said, equality is a different word. It's the state of being equal, especially in status, rights, and opportunities, whereas equity has a different and vital meaning when it comes to diversity, multiculturalism, et cetera. These are accepted words by the majority of society today, and I have no issues adding the word equality, but replacing them changes the charge. So I have no problem, if Emily would be comfortable and George who seconded would be comfortable saying equity, equality, and inclusion. That's not an issue for me, but otherwise I would be a no to that amendment alone.
So is it amenable to those making the motion and seconding to amend that motion to just include equality and equity and inclusion in all sectors of the community?
I'm personally troubled by the word equity. I'm not sure I fully understand what it means. And I would prefer not to see the word in there, partly because I'm confused by it. In today's jargon, it's used to mean one thing, perhaps different from what the dictionary says.
I think my concern, Mike, and maybe make this more clear, and as George said, I did a lot of research on this, and I think we look at it, equality is protected under the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. That's how I started this. But equity is to say, so equality is saying we're giving everyone the same opportunities. And in my research, what it's saying is equity is ensuring equal outcomes. I'm troubled as a town, can we ensure equal outcomes? I don't know if we can, and that opens up some gray areas to me. But I'm comfortable saying we're gonna give everybody the same opportunities. And if we're not doing that and we're excluding people, then I'm troubled. But equity has, as you said, it's a totally different meaning, and I'm not sure that's something as a town that we could live up to that standard. We can't ensure equal outcomes for everybody.
Any other comments on this?
Just in response just to that point, I think it's important to note that what's being proposed here is not a policy, is not a committee that's going to have any authority to implement any policies in town. This is an advisory committee that's going to look into issues and bring recommendations back to the Board of Selectmen that then can evaluate and say, well, no, maybe that's not fair to all segments, or maybe that doesn't make sense, or, oh, that's a great idea, let's take it further. So it's advisory only. So in that case, I'm in favor with adding the language you want to add, Emily, with Mike's caveat that we add it instead of strike language, because we're not giving this body authority to then go implement the things you're concerned about. It's just information gathering, listening to the public, showing people that we're listening, we're understanding, and we want to improve. So in that vein, since we, the board, are still the decision-making body, I'm comfortable with the language.
I think, and I completely understand that. I understand that they're just coming back, researching, coming back to us, nothing's getting implemented. my concern with that is, are we not charging a task force then with things that we're gonna task them to research that we then cannot implement? Is that not, is that in their best interest? I don't know.
Jeff, may I?
Yes, Mike, thank you.
Thank you for the discussion. I think it's important. I would suggest that with the addition instead of the striking of the word, you know, to Jason's point, and I mentioned this earlier, they're not setting policy, they're coming with recommendations, which could include policy recommendations, by the way. But I'd suggest that perhaps we'll learn from this group what they believe equity is. You know, it's another reason why I do believe having someone from Region 15 involved is actually critical. Having an educator, you know, on here, because there's no question in my mind that education and information is something that we as a board need, you know, to learn and to grow. And I don't think that the charge changes that. Let's let this group decide. And if then we as the Board of Selectmen, as the elected official in this town, decide to take some action or no action, so be it. But you know, I think it's also to note that this is not, we're not inventing a wheel here. This is the, you know, a type of group that, that towns all over the state increasingly are having. Some call them human rights commissions, some call them, you know, some come up with cute names. But I think that this is a starting point. For us to learn and be informed and see what we hear, and also it becomes another venue for citizens to add their voice to our deliberation, which I always think is important.
So the motion on the floor and seconded is to strike the word equity and replace it with the word equality. I will be calling the vote. I believe that I would rather see the word equality added to the sentence, ways to improve equality, equity, and inclusion. I will call the vote on the motion unless there's a withdrawal of the motion. I will call the vote. All in favor of this motion to replace equity with equality, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
And it does not carry.
In that light, having listened to this discussion that we just had, and I understand Emily's points, and I think they should be included in the motion, I would like to now make a motion to add the word equality. So
Do I have a second?
Equality, equity, and inclusion.
I'll second that.
Made and seconded. Any further discussion on adding equality to the sentence? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? What's that?
I'll oppose it because I like the elimination of
No.
the word equity, frankly.
Okay.
I'm not,
One, George Bertram, nay.
Nay.
Emily Harrison, nay. It carries. So now we'll call the original,
Mr. Chairman, I did have some comments on the original motion,
okay?
which I'll speak in support of, and I'll be brief. I'll just note, back on June 18th of last year, I made some substantial comments at this meeting, and I'll just highlight a couple of things I said at that time. I said, we need to open our minds and our hearts to hear others' perspectives. We need to listen and foster an environment of inclusion to make sure our residents feel safe, valued, and heard, regardless of skin color, ethnic background, religious, sexual orientation, or other characteristics. The first step is learning, listening, understanding, and conversing. I look forward to exploring next steps as a community. And I'll just say that I think that what's being proposed here tonight is a good first step. I think it's an important discussion for us to have with our community, to listen, to learn, to understand. And I'll just respond to one comment made earlier about Region 15. I think Region 15 is such an important aspect of our community, but also they've done a lot of work in this area. They have, over the last 4 or 5 years or so, had a committee doing this work. They've done a good job. And I think that the town will benefit from that experience and that discussion with them. So I do think that their involvement in this would be an important component.
I had one other point I wanted to make as well, I forgot earlier, and Mike reminded me this when he's talking about citizens. And I will feign ignorance potentially on this and not knowing. We look at this task force and we're saying we're having advisors from Region 15, members of clergy. I mean, these people potentially are not Southbury residents, and typically our boards and commissions and task force are made up of residents of Southbury. So is the proper thing not to make them liaisons to the task force rather than members of the task force? Since they're not, potentially not Southbury residents?
Well, I think any member should, I mean, I'll agree with you. I think any member of the task force should be a Southbury resident. The Region 15 component is an advisor, as I read it.
Well, it's saying it's consisting of an advisor from Region 15, but that's still a member of the task force, even though they're the advisor. I mean, that's just how I read it, but I think we need to change this so that it's clear that they are liaisons if they are not town residents.
Well, I would say, and sorry, Jeff, can I chime in?
Go ahead,
Thank-
Mike.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've read it, you know, and I worked with Jeff and read it. I've always, the reason why it's written as such is that the Region 15 school district individual is an advisor. It consists of an advisor, a Southbury High School student, you know, a member of the clergy, et cetera. I do agree with Emily's prior comment, by the way, that we should add, we should make this 2 community representatives, in my opinion. One should be a representative from the community at large, and one should be a community representative from Heritage Village. I think that's an important, I do actually think that it's such a large and significant portion of our community that to not do so would be amiss. So I think that is a good, you know, a very reasonable and good recommendation.
I'm just reminded of our discussion when we formed the EMS committee early last year. This is where my memory gets into trouble because I remember these things. We had a discussion about that, about whether we should have a representative from Heritage Village, and I don't remember where we landed, but I thought we landed on a representative of the senior population.
Yes.
Instead of
Yes.
Heritage Village,
Yes.
because we didn't want to, you're
Better.
now excluding, I mean, we have a large senior population in this town. A lot of it lives in
Right.
Heritage Village, but, you know, you live in the greater part of the town as well, so you don't want to, you know, exclude that perspective regardless of where their geography might be.
No, I agree. I think sometimes all too often it's just
We
easier
all
to
do,
say
yeah.
Heritage
Yep.
Village as a representation. So yes, a member of
I'd
the
agree.
senior population.
So I'd make a motion, can we make do we have a motion on the floor? Can I amend it?
I can make a motion to add a member of the senior population.
And was there something else other than that?
Well, I made the point that we should be clear that if these people are not town residents, that they are liaisons, not members.
Do we need to stipulate who the liaisons are, or can we just rely on a commission or?
Well, I think the only one up here, the task force consists of an advisor from Region 15 School District.
Well, I have a recommendation, Jeff.
Go ahead.
We could make the advisor from the Region 15 School District serve, to make it clearer for Emily's sake, and I think it makes sense. They can be a non-voting ex officio member of the task force, so they don't have voting rights on, you know, if that would make Emily more comfortable. And that would, if they are not then a member of the community, a resident of the community, it sort of clarifies the advisor role versus a voting member of a task force that would be making, you know, voting as a task force to make a recommendation to the board. Would that make sense?
So I will amend my motion to change, to add, to also change advisor to ex officio non-voting member.
Well, what are we going to do about the religious person on this?
I think we've got to table this. so that town
Ah.
council can review.
Are you saying that members of the religious community can't volunteer in town government?
No, they just can't be appointed because of religious, I mean, that's pretty clear if you read the laws. You cannot appoint somebody to a commission because they're of a certain religion or of any religion, which in this case, it is. I mean,
But this to me is a task force, and we've
It-
often
Jeff-
it doesn't matter
included,
whether it's a
I
task
think-
force or anything. If it's a governmental agency.
Point of order, though, I think we've got a motion on the floor that we should vote on, and then we can go back to the discussion before we vote on anything else.
so what's the motion current?
The motion is to add a member of the senior population to the task force and to change advisor to ex officio non-voting member.
For the Region 15 School District individual.
Yeah, it's
Represent-
the only place
Yep,
that advisor
yep.
is used.
Yep.
Okay,
I'll second that.
okay. Made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? And it carries.
Jeff, if I might make a recommendation to George's concern, rather than tabling it, because I don't think we need to do that, if we can make the vote pending the approval of town council, and if town council informs you that we cannot, appoint a member of the clergy, that a member of the clergy similarly serve as a non-voting ex officio member of the task force.
I think we just had a discussion, though, I mean, and you all just said, there's no rush on this when it comes to town manager, we're not in an emergency state, and that certainly applies here as well. This is not an emergency. I would feel more comfortable when voting on this to have heard from town council before voting on something and then waiting for town council to come back. It might change how we potentially discuss the task force or to put it together, how we describe it. There we go. I can use words. So I would just feel we're not in a rush here. Let's let town council weigh in and table this until our next meeting.
So
I support
how do you
that.
envision as I understand it, we're forming a task force tonight, right? We haven't populated it, though.
No,
So the Board of Selectmen is going to have to make a motion at another meeting once we've gathered interest from anyone, and we're talking, it's gonna be a month out before we
yes,
are able to populate this. So during that time, I think there's sufficient time to get the opinion and get the interest from the community, but as long as we're just making a motion to create the task force now, but we're not actually forming it yet, we're not putting people on it, so then they're
Correct.
gonna go start working tomorrow, then I think the concerns that, I agree with George and Emily's concerns that we need to check it out, but I think they're alleviated because we're not populating it. This task force is not going to be functioning yet. So we can approve it in concept, and then it's gonna take a while to find the members and do what we're gonna do.
So my only concern with approving it in concept is that then we're improving the concept of it as it reads right now, which that also includes in the description, not just who's a part of it, but and local religious institutions. So I would just feel more comfortable if we can get town council to weigh in before we vote on this.
Do you support the motion if town council says it's legal?
I have no problem. I don't know why. I just would like town council to weigh in on this. I think it's a valid concern when we're talking about something that's under the Constitution.
Yeah, I don't see any wiggle room on this. I mean, everything I read about it, it's pretty clear that we cannot favor religious convictions over non-religion, or we can't favor one religion over another, and this clearly specifies a religious institution. Which religious institution? Is it a rabbi? Is it a priest? Is it a pastor? That becomes problematic.
Well, and that goes back, and let me say this too, I mean, Jason, to your point in saying, do you support this? The concept here, fine. I still have an issue with the word equity. I think that troubles me versus equality and the replacement. I mentioned that earlier too. But I also have an issue too when we look at this and wanting to make sure we're saying this is about inclusion. are we being completely inclusive and with that scope? I mean, even if we said, okay, it's fine to have a member of clergy, well, that member doesn't represent all religions. How do we be inclusive within this? And it feels like this is a small representation of inclusivity within our community.
I agree with Emily. I think if you're gonna do this, you really need to think hard about who you're gonna put on this, what groups are gonna be represented and what aren't, and I think it's premature to vote on this tonight.
And I say that from the perspective, I mean, we got this basically 24 hours before the meeting. This came out yesterday, and just at looking at it, it came up with Heritage Village, senior population. Are there other areas that we might be missing here? I think of a community representative. Well, we've identified the senior population. What about having someone who represents youth as well versus just any community representative? I just want to make sure here, if we're being inclusive, that we're truly being inclusive.
If I might, Jeff?
Mike, go ahead.
The point on youth is well taken, and it is represented in a specifically calling out a Southbury high school student. I would if it pleases the board, I would like to amend my original motion regarding the task force and amend it to I move that we approve as we've amended. We vote to move as we've amended to date. The mission of the Community Relations Task Force, and call the vote.
Do I have a second on that? So
Second.
made and seconded. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I just think it's really disappointing that we can't take the time for town council to do this before making the motion and putting it forward. I can't in good conscience vote on something that might violate the Constitution before having town council weigh in.
Okay,
We're,
Why the rush? I mean, we talked about this with the town manager issue.
Yeah.
And now we have time to think about it. Why do we have to rush this? Let's think it through. It's a
Jason,
worthwhile endeavor.
I'm-
I'm not fighting doing it. I just want to do it in the right way. I want to see seniors represented. Being a member of the senior community in this town, I have personally experienced discrimination against age. I mean, I've seen it, I've felt it. And that's a big part of, I think, when you talk about inclusion, I think that's something that needs to be represented on this. It's not just Region 15. I think there's a much bigger problem there. And we have a lot more seniors who I think would concur that if you're old, you don't have the same opportunities as younger people.
And while we may have alleviated that, my point is, you know, George and I have now said, is why the rush? Let's take the time, let's really hone in on this, let's make sure we get it right. You know, if there is, and this is coming forward, and I said, it's to improve, as it reads, now equality, equity, and inclusion. That's for my take, that they're saying there's inequality, inequity, exclusion. Yeah, we should be focusing on that. That's, like I said before, under the 14th Amendment, where you have that equal access. So if there isn't that, then I take trouble with it. But I want to make sure that this task force is representative. I want to make sure that when we talk about separation of church and state, that there's nothing here. I would just ask that if we could wait and just talk about this vote on this at our next meeting, just to make sure we cover our bases. I don't see a harm in that.
Jason, I thought you were gonna say something?
No, so I'm just gonna, the reason I don't have the concern that's being raised is because of what I said. We're approving a concept that's not getting populated, and they're not, like, if these folks were all named and they're gonna go have a meeting tomorrow, then I would totally understand the concern. But that's not what we're doing. Also, I think we're going to learn from the experience as this gets going. We're not going to be able to answer those questions about making sure we include all the aspects that we need to include until it gets going. I think we are, but this is going to be adjusted, and I think that they had that sort of learning experience in Region 15 as well. Like, this is a task force created by the board that's advisory, so it's not like it's not in the charter that says it has to have 6 members and 3 alternates, and these are the terms, and you're stuck with it. This is fluid. We can add, we can subtract, and we should. We should listen, we should learn, and we should determine whether the group needs to be expanded and whatnot. That's why I don't have the concerns that you're raising. I understand the concerns, but the reason I don't have them is because this task force isn't, going out tomorrow.
And, sorry, Jeff, Jason, were you done? I wasn't sure.
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mike.
Right. I would just, add to that, if one, to the point George made, the senior population we've addressed. My motion took in the amendments that we agreed to, and one of them was adding a member of the senior population. So I think that you're right, by the way, that is one of the areas of discrimination without question. Ageism is unquestionably an area that needs to be addressed. To Emily's point, if it would make her more comfortable, I'll amend my amended motion to include pending review and commentary by town council. But I don't believe there's any reason, to Jason's point, to uphold it. To his point, we're not really doing anything other than approving the concept tonight. And if we hear from town council that there's an issue, we can come back and then review it and refine the language.
And my comments were based on my understanding that I thought that was part of the motion, that it was subject to town council approval. And I think that makes sense, because once you do that, you've now alleviated all the concerns that have been raised. If there's a concern that's raised that hasn't been alleviated, then I agree with you, Emily. We need to deal with it, and if it can't be alleviated, then we need to delay it. But the concerns you've all raised have been alleviated.
I don't feel like it's been alleviated though, because we're talking about this. I understand you keep saying in concept, but the reality is that once we approve this, that we can go out and finding the members.
Subject to?
I understand that, if I can finish. But if we can have this is a big part of it. I mean, you're looking at it, the two things it calls out, Region 15, local religious institutions. So my question back to you, you say to me, well, would you vote on this if it was approved by it? Well, what's the harm in waiting, Jason? Why does it make a difference if we vote on it tonight versus voting on it after hearing from town council? It's still getting approved. It's just waiting to hear back. What's the rush, everybody? I'd love to know.
Okay, so the motion is on the floor to call the vote. I'll call the,
What exactly are we voting on? Can we make that
for,
totally clear?
actually, my understanding is the motion is made second to call the vote, have the chair call the vote. I think I have that authority to call the vote anyway.
So if I'm more than glad if you want me to clarify what my amended motion was, though, for George, if he'd like me,
I don't know what we're voting
So
on.
George, so why don't you clarify the motion?
So it is to approve the formation of a community relations task force with the mission as amended and approved and voted on by this board, pending the approval and review and approval by town council.
And that was seconded and discussed. I'll call the vote. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? It carries.
Is that unanimous? I didn't hear any.
I heard I heard no nay. Okay, so to clarify, on that vote, Justin,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Jason,
Aye.
Emily? Emily?
I think I'm going to abstain from the vote on the ground that I'm just not comfortable with voting on this until I hear from town council first. I think I've made that
George?
clear.
I'll abstain as well. I don't think this needs to be rushed through tonight. I don't know why we're rushing this.
Okay.
There's plenty of time. We could talk about it at the next meeting and get all the questions answered.
And I'll vote,
Determine the exact membership we want, which every time we voted on a commission or a board, we've always stipulated how many members and who they were. And we're not doing that here, which is kind of unprecedented.
No, that's gonna happen.
What?
That, when we voted to.
we're in the
form
middle
EMS
of a vote.
I'm sorry, but.
Sorry, that's okay, point of order. Round, and I'll vote aye. And it passes.
Fine.
Okay. Next on the agenda, the EMS draft plan, it's a draft. It's not finalized, but it will be out there. If there's any questions, we'll get that firmed up. The next on the agenda is consideration of canceling April 15th, 2021 meeting. I understand there's a lot of school vacations and things going on. What I would say is if we were to cancel the April 15th, 2021 meeting, that does not mean that we cannot have a special meeting if needed on particular matters that could be called. There's three here with young families. I'd like to hear from the three board members with young families first. Mike, would you be comfortable? I'm sure your kids have.
I have no plans to be going anywhere, but certainly whatever the consensus of the board is, I'm comfortable with this. And if you wanted to find a new date, I'm comfortable with that too. We're not going anywhere yet, so.
Yeah, my idea is that we just, if something should have to be put onto an agenda to discuss, we can still do it. And we probably would move it to the non-school vacation timing, if that's.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Anybody else? Is there a
Jeff,
motion?
Justin here.
Justin, hello.
I'm also not going anywhere, but I do think it makes sense to cancel or postpone the meeting because obviously there are a significant number of Southbury families that are probably, going to take advantage of the time off to get out of town and not be able to participate in the meeting. So I'm fine with canceling or postponing and using special meetings to move things along that might need it in the interim.
Okay. Is there a motion?
So moved. To
Do I have a
cancel the
second?
April 15 meeting.
Any second on the motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you.
I'll just mention, I believe I will be away. That's not a reason to cancel the meeting, so if you were to have a meeting, I'd ask that any significant item not be dealt with primarily for the reasons Justin mentioned, that our community isn't here. I've heard a lot about a lot of people not being around.
Okay. I'm good with that. Motion made and seconded. All in favor of canceling the April 15th regular Board of Selectmen's meeting, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And it carries. Just FYI, you've been reminded, there's an April 7th joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance that we'll be attending if we can. Okay. Reports from.
Jeff, I have one additional new business item, if I could put it before the board. I apologize for getting it in late, but I don't know, Betsy, if you could throw that resolution up there? If that's okay. I'll make a motion to consider this resolution at this meeting.
Second?
What resolution?
Motion made to, and seconded. George made the motion, Emily seconded.
Point of order, I think, Mr. Chairman, if Selectman Bertram would like to add something to the meeting, there should be a motion to add it to the agenda.
I thought that's what George was doing.
No, he made a motion to consider the resolution at this meeting. You have to make what's the topic that you want to add to the agenda?
Okay, well, I'll make a motion to add the topic of a resolution in support of home rule and municipal zoning decision-making to the agenda.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to add to new business a discussion on Say that again, George?
It's a resolution in support of home rule in municipal zoning and decision-making.
Okay. Any discussion on that?
I've been talking with some of our state reps, and they encouraged us to consider this resolution. It is pro-home rule in zoning and planning. I think Connecticut at the state level is considering a lot of bills that would take away a lot of the control that the local towns have on zoning and planning issues. Some of those are very concerning to a lot of residents. And I've been asked to present this resolution. I didn't write it. I did borrow it from another source. But it is supported by Cindy Harrison, Dave Labriola. I believe Eric Berthel supports it as well. I didn't talk to him directly. So that is what they are asking us to support. And I've read it, and I do support it myself. And I would ask the board to consider voting on it, to join in.
So I'm just going to make a procedural point, which it seems that I'm having to make it at a lot of meetings these days. And I'll preface it by saying I am not in favor and am against the majority of the legislation being proposed at the state that is seeking to take away rights of municipalities over municipal zoning. But to add an item to the agenda at the end of the meeting without any notice to the public and any notice to this board, without providing a lengthy resolution to us in advance, I don't see how we can sit here and review it and determine, in concept, sure, it might be against those things, but it's something that, and this shouldn't be a surprise to you because I've made this point many times at this board, and I never vote on anything that's handed to me the night of a meeting, and I'm gonna stick with that tonight, even though I'm probably in favor of this. But, I think we need to follow a better process. These bills have been presented at the legislature over a period of months ago, and there's certainly enough time to present it to this board so we can evaluate it and review it in advance of the meeting. So I'd be happy to talk about it at another meeting. I think it's a worthy topic, but I'm not in favor of talking about it tonight.
I don't think there's any harm in a member of the board adding something to our agenda prior to a meeting, just as a discussionary point. Is everybody prepared to vote on it? Perhaps not, but as a discussion, and then it can just move to unfinished business as a part of the next meeting.
The concern that I heard from Cindy Harrison specifically was that these debates are occurring at a very rapid pace in Hartford as we speak. And if we cancel the April 15th meeting and we wait till May for the next meeting, it may be too late. We're a day late and a dollar short at that point. I do apologize for bringing this up at the last minute. I know but I didn't receive it really until this afternoon. So it was late this afternoon, so I really did not have it together earlier. If I did, I would have sent it out sooner. But
I think this is an important topic in knowing that it's time sensitive. When cases like this have come before the board in the past, we've always done a special meeting in order to do that. If the rest of the board would be in favor, I'm happy to be a part of or to propose that we have a special meeting next week at some point to be able to give proper notice, fill the time necessary, the time urgency's sake, and to be able to vote on this, because I agree with George. I think there is some implications if we do wait until our next meeting.
Mike or Justin?
Thanks, Jeff. I would, I do concur with with Jason's point, I'm more than comfortable discussing this at the next meeting. I have no issues with George bringing it up now. I'm certainly not prepared to vote on it now. I think there's a lot of misinformation about what I assume George is referring to as SB 1024, which is the bill that is being under consideration in Hartford. I'm quite familiar with it because of my professional life, and certainly think it's worthy of discussion at the municipal level, but I think we should just add it to the agenda for our next meeting. I don't believe there's any belief that before our next meeting there's going to be a vote. This will likely carry on throughout the legislative session, and I don't think we're in harm's way. And if there is a vote, we can always get together in a special meeting.
Mike, I would mention that there are about 11 or 12 different bills that tie into this discussion.
Yeah.
It's not just
The biggest one is
SB
Not just
1024.
Yep.
Okay, so,
Let me just be clear on, my concern is really directed at, well, one at us. I mean, we shouldn't have to come into a meeting gathering our thoughts on something that, of significance that we haven't had any notice of in advance. But also, it's a consideration for our public. I mean, our public needs to be noticed of what we're talking about at meetings so they can have an opportunity to then come speak with us. And the reason why, the reason why I've become more strict in my view of this is because it seems to be happening so often at our meetings lately that I really think that it's puts our public at a disadvantage, and that's why I'm not in favor of it from a procedural perspective. I probably support the resolution. I certainly support the concept, as I've stated. So I'm happy to discuss it at the next meeting. We're actually all meeting next week, so I wouldn't have a problem doing it then.
that's next week on April 7th.
Could we add that to our agenda for April 7th?
Yeah, we can do that.
Great.
Oh,
Yeah.
Or after.
okay. We'll look at that and try to schedule it before or after on April 7th. We'll look, what time is the,
7th.
7? Okay. So we'll try and do that. Hopefully we'll do it before. All right. So let's put it out to the board. We'll try and do the 6:30. Put the notice out, and then we'll put it on for that.
I appreciate that consideration, and I know Cindy will as well. Sorry for the late submission, but it wasn't really under my control.
That works.
Was it under your control?
Well, I could have not submitted it.
Oh,
I mean, I didn't write this. There's a lot of people involved with creating this, and
I mean, for the board's benefit, who wrote it? I'd like to know who's
I'm not
proposing
even
it.
sure who wrote it. It came through a number of different channels. I could not tell you exactly the person who wrote it, but it's been endorsed by a number of people, including David and Cindy, and I believe Eric Berthel.
Yeah, George, if you could, by the time we gather, if you could find out who the source is, I think that'd be worthwhile.
I'll look into it, although I'm not sure if my investigative powers are adequate to find that out.
May have
I'll
gone
ask the
through a
question.
number of iterations to get to this point. So to
This
say
has
there's
gone-
one author, to find out who authored it, it may not be accurate, I would imagine.
well, if we get that and who sent it to you, we could have some information. All right, so there's a motion on the floor. I think if the motion could be withdrawn?
I'll withdraw the motion to
That's
take
a
a vote
simple-
on this tonight, and just, we'll pick it up later next week.
Point of
Okay.
order, it wasn't to vote, it was just to add it to the agenda.
Well, that's true, so we don't
That's
have to
true.
withdraw
Add
anything.
it to the agenda. And it was added to the agenda.
No, we never voted, this is
Never
all in
voted.
discussion on the motion
It was
to
all-
add it to the agenda.
Are we safe? Just,
Yeah.
it's been withdrawn, we're all right? Okay, just
We're-
making
we're
sure,
done.
we don't want to miss a step here. You know how that is. We don't want to miss a step. Okay. Next on the agenda is Selectmen's Report. I was sent this by Dan Colton, just so you know. There was information on an internal audit. The good news is Bloom and Shapiro conducted an internal audit of the tax assessor and fiscal offices. They completed that task last Friday and found no significant deficiencies in any of the departments. A full report will be available by the next meeting, and thank you to the staff of these departments for their continued great work. So we're doing very well in that regard. Just so everybody knows, I think they do know, implementation of the online permitting system went fairly well. The system has been implemented ahead of schedule. I would like to recognize the group of employees who got this done. It truly was a group effort, starting way back with Ray Mathers and Gosha. I asked them to document the processes and procedures that were used in land use on the third floor. Evidently, this documentation was part of the reason the implementation went so quickly, so well. There are a few bugs. Research continued into the different software, and a consensus of the group chose the software. The implementation included the entire land use floor, and our IT department and the Board of Selectmen in our community can be proud of the cooperative and enthusiastic effort of their employees. DPW workers continue to do great work on projects. The wall at the driveway leading up to the fuel station has been built. Landscaping is being done. The chip sealing and crack sealing that is so important to our road program, they got together and lined it up with the vendor to make sure we're in the schedule to get that done. Again, the Board of Selectmen and our citizens can be proud of the conscientious, dedicated public works crews, outside services crews, and the building services crews. It's going pretty well. Reports from liaisons. George?
I really only have one topic to report on, and that's the Energy Task Force has submitted a recommendation for a VNM provider. I'm reluctant to talk about that in public because there's two bids, and I'm not sure where we are with that. One vendor has been recommended by the task force, and that information went to Dan Colton and the First Selectman's office. So you probably know more about that than I do at this point, as to where that is.
Okay.
The target for signing up for the VNM was set as April 15th. I don't know what needs to happen at this point since there's no money involved. Perhaps just the First Selectman can sign the letter and essentially sign the contract, or does it need to get approved by the board? I'm not quite sure how that should be handled, but that's really the only topic I have.
Okay. Selectman Betty?
Economic development has not met from our last meeting, since our last meeting, but Kevin sent some updates over. Choice Pet, which is taking the place of Pet Value up in the Southbury Plaza, is having their ribbon cutting on April 17th, if anybody on the BOS would like to attend. The lower level of Riverview Cinema has been approved to take tenants, and they are currently talking with some. The restaurant promo just ended. Just under $20,000 worth of receipts were submitted over the 10 weeks, and it's been looked at as quite a success. If you haven't already been there and or noticed, the new Chatfields has gotten their CO as of today. They've been open for a better part of a week or more in their new, larger building. And it's now a matter of public record that 1200 Main Street South, what Jeff and I and others have always known as the Romatic Manufacturing Company, has been sold. We're not sure who the new owner is or what their plans are, but Kevin is on the hunt to find out what's going on. IPOC did meet on March 22nd You guys get the flash reports. All of our accounts with them are doing very well, as you might imagine with what's going on in the stock market. Senior Commission also has not met, but I can report that they've been interviewing transportation coordinators this week. I've sat in on those interviews, and there are some compelling candidates in consideration. That's it for now.
Selectman Bucksbaum?
My boards have not met since our last meeting, so nothing to
Okay.
report.
Selectman Harrison?
Library meets next week. Library hasn't met yet, 2 weeks, I think, yes. Well, many of you saw the great work of the EMS committee tonight in the letter of support for SAA and the EMS draft plan. I can't say enough about this committee, the great work, their expertise. I'm continually blown away and appreciate their commitment. They have put in a request to the First Selectman's office for the volunteer appreciation program to approve that, and also to search for a new alternate member of the committee. Haven't heard back on that yet, so if you could look into that, they would greatly appreciate it.
Okay, Selectman Rosen?
Thanks, Jeff. Planning hasn't met since we were last together. Parks and Rec did meet. I was able to participate via Teams in a portion of it, but there were some technical issues, so I didn't hear all of it, but I did follow up. And there was a public comment from a citizen regarding some concerns he had on some instances of over at the community park basketball courts with some kids playing loud, explicit music. Wanted to know how the commission might be able to address the problem. The commission agreed that they're going to post a code of conduct at the courts and ask the Southbury PD to do occasional, routine patrols by the courts. It's spring, and I think there's a real desire, certainly as more and more people get vaccine, to enjoy outside. So the commissioners are going to be visiting the parks again in April and May, and letting Parks and Rec know if there are any other issues they find in terms of things in need of repair. Split rail fence, I don't know if it's up yet, but it's going up any day at Settlers. Camp registration is open. They do plan to hold full day camp this year with still some restrictions. And swim information is going to be coming up within the week. I'm just trying to think if there's any other key issues there. There have been some discussions with LOF, the nonprofit, over at and their conversations with First Light. Just so everyone's aware, they're continuing to have discussions. Nothing's happened yet, but they're hoping to have a long-term lease on the property over by the former River Road Park, finished June 20. They may then return to us, I'd assume, for the right-of-way, Jeff. So we might need to talk about that, extending that. I'll follow up. Jim Tornatore, a member of the commission, has been sort of the liaison with LOF, so I'll follow up with him. That's it from Parks and Rec. We're going to try to meet. They're going to try to meet at the at Ballantyne Pavilion for the next meeting, so the commissioners can visit the pool and look at the state of the pool at that point. Region 15 did meet, and they had their regular, they had their joint Board of Finance, Southbury Middlebury Board of Finance presentation and review and Q&A on the budget last week, and the budget vote is on April 7th. John Michaels and others, and we're there, and I thought it went pretty well. If for those who didn't get a chance to listen in, the presentation that was given is on the Region 15 website. If anybody wants it here, just let me know. If for ease, I'm more than glad to send it to anyone.
Okay. Just on that note, Mike, on LOF, if they get their permits in place, they get a permit for crossing, like.
Yeah.
We just give that to them once they get their
Okay.
permit in place.
Yeah. I'll keep you posted once I hear more from Jim Tornatore on where they're at.
Thank you. Okay, motion to enter into executive session to discuss potential real estate transaction for open space. Second?
Second.
Any discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
All right.
opposed, and it carries. You're gonna dial in, the selectman, could you dial into 205? Okay? If not, just call us on the phone.
Do we have the number? Do you guys want to, what's the line in there?
208, I'm sorry.
Yes, it's the number I sent you earlier.
The number that that you were texted earlier
Got
was
it.
in 208,